Hello, welcome. Happy to have all of you here today. It is Team Habits launch day, and I'm really excited to see some folks that I have not had the pleasure of meeting before. So thank you, hello, and welcome. And also faces that we do already recognize. Also, thank you, hello, and welcome. Just really happy to be here. We have the wonderful Pam Slim with us today. And she and Charlie are going to be having a little conversation here about team habits. And she is going to head out about halfway through so that we can then move into doing some Q&A with Charlie about team habits. But just, a heads up what this will look like. They'll have their conversation. We'll have some Q&A. I'm going to do a random number generator over here and we'll be towards the end of the call. I'll be picking names based on numbers of where you're at here on Zoom, and we'll be giving away a couple of copies, autographed copies of Team Habits towards the end. So if Megan DMs you, I'll say who it is, but if she DMs you, it's to ask for your mailing address. So that's what that's about. So I'm going to go ahead and just hand it over here to Pam, and I will head off video myself, but I'm going to let Pam introduce Charlie and let them start doing their thing here.
Wonderful. Well, good morning, everyone from Mesa, Arizona. I am here at our CAF Community Lab, and I'm so happy today to be celebrating with someone who I call my little brother, Charlie Gilkey. I think we met 2009 at South by Southwest, something like that, at a party, as one does at South by Southwest.
I was such a fanboy. It was bad. It was bad.
Well, little did you know that I was about to be a fan girl / woman, because meeting Charlie for me was one of the most important, I think, junctures of my life. We ended up just totally connecting on work, talking about all kinds of things. And then we ended up creating Liftoff, which was a entrepreneur retreat that we ran for 3 years with Angela, with cohorts of participants twice a year, once here in Phoenix and then once in Portland. And Charlie is one of these people, to me, that no matter what is happening, you're being chased by the mafia, there is an online troll who doesn't like you, I will be there for you 100%. And one of the reasons why I feel that way about Charlie is because I have never met somebody who is so clear in who he is and the way that he demonstrates partnerships and team habits. Charlie literally has faced bullets in his role in the Army in Iraq, coordinating logistics. And he is the kind of person for me that has never, ever caused me to feel any doubt about the fact that he has my back. Have we disagreed? Yes. Have we sometimes been like, really, Charlie? Really, Pam? Are you doing this? But part of, to me, what a criteria is for somebody who is a thought leader in a particular area is where they really walk the talk. And so that's why I'm so excited, having seen the twinkle in his eye first of Start Finishing and now of Team Habits, to really be celebrating today the launch of your new book. So Charlie, welcome to your own book launch.
Yeah, that's when Angela and I were talking about who we might like to do this with, is like Pam was the first on the list, right? For all the reasons that we mentioned, the different ways that our body of works have evolved and co-evolved and sort of split together. So yeah, it's really a treat to be here and to have you here. So thanks for carving out this morning. I know you're busy, and so we get 20 more minutes of Pam before it's just going to be my mug. Sorry about it, y'all.
Hey, as I said, I want to really get into the heart of the book, and I was cracking up reading it because at Liftoff, one of the things when we were doing a particular session, talking with people about their work environment, and metaphor that you always used was about a broken printer, which has been a central metaphor in the book Team Habits for those of you who haven't read it yet. So talk to us about why you chose that metaphor for the many ways often that our teams are not functioning effectively or straight out or broken.
I'm glad you started there. And for some people, this body of work actually feels like a divergence from what I've been doing, right? So they sort of know me as the productivity guy and the Start Finishing guy. But Pam knows, and a lot of y'all knows, I've been doing this the whole time, right? It's just been in the background. And so, the reason I stick with broken printers, or I use that, is because every organization I've ever worked at or consulted with has had a broken printer that everyone knows about. And it's just one of those things that just lingers around. It's on that conference chair, like it never prints right, and it really messes things up. But it's one of those things where, like, the printer itself is not really the issue. It's the downstream effects of the printer that get you. So people scrambling and people not being able to be present during meetings because they don't have an agenda. Like, I've got an agenda for this one. And so it's the consequences, but for me, it's really a symptom of whether the team and the manager cares enough to solve little problems. And that's the real thing that I want to get in, because, when we get down to it, a broken printer, it's at most $500 decision that someone can make in 30 minutes, right? And yet it lingers and it messes us up, and we stub our toe on it, or it prints wrong. And for me, it's just really one of those fascinating things. Like, why don't we fix it? There have been plenty of work environments that I've worked in, especially in the Army, where it's like there were plenty of broken printers and things like that. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to buy a printer for, like, I don't need requisitions. I don't need that. I'm just going to buy a printer so my team doesn't have to fight this day in and day out, and we can do great work, right? And so it's always been an issue for me. It's like, why don't more people fix the broken printers? And so I just use that because it's a very tangible, concrete way. But, it's not about broken printers. It could be the CC thread from hell, right? That we get in, like, if you've ever worked in a corporate environment, you get like 18 like bomb CC threads that you have to sort of wade through and read through to see if it is relevant to you. If there's anything in there that you need to know. Like, that's another example of a broken printer. Or the ways in which some teams just can't get right with link permissions on collaborative docs, right? It's like,
oh my
time,
God, how many people have just banged their head against the desk with that one? Yeah.
Yeah. And so those are other examples of broken printers. And it's really why do they exist, and what can we do to actually solve them?
I'm trying to remember if it was a liftoff person, but I think I remember sometime when we were doing this exercise, there was somebody who had a keyboard that, like, the letter F or something wouldn't work. And so they're like, I just tried to write without using the letter F, which for me would never work because I swear too much. But it's an example, right, of like, what? Like, that's the workaround, is you're going to be in your brain like, okay, I can't use flower. I can't use forward. Like, it's amazing, even in our own lives, how much we do that. And I can see in the whole world of team dynamics, there are so many different assumptions that can be made, frustrations that can go with, why isn't anybody noticing? Is it safe to mention the fact that there's a broken printer? It is a metaphor that really makes sense. So part of the key architecture in the book is a word I love, because I love a good word that's created by a thought leader, which is workways. In the earlier iterations of the book, that may have been a title that was thrown around. Mm-hmm. Tell us about, when we think of like a symptom of a dysfunctional team culture being a broken printer that never gets addressed, how do workways come in terms of a solution to strengthening team culture?
Yeah, Pam, you're right. The original book proposal actually centered workways more so than team habits. And workways are what they sound like. They're simply the ways that we work together. They're an extension of the sociologist term folkways, right? And so there are folkways and mores, if you all remember that in college in sociology, right? And so from that, I was thinking, but we also have these workways. And the interesting thing about workways and team habits is that they're mostly unconscious, implicit agreements that we have with each other. Like, we don't consciously say, like, hey, y'all, the broken printer is just over there and we're just going to deal with it. And it's just part of it. We don't say that. Or we don't say, no one, well, I'll give an example here, because when I was stumping for start finishing, which is where team habits came from, I'll get on CC threads from hell, and there'd be a room full of multiple layers of the echelon, right? And I would say, like, okay, so who here decided that this is how we do things? Who here likes the CC thread from hell? Who said this is how we're going to do things? Have we talked about it? And no one raises their hand. And then it's like, who would like to get rid of it? Everybody raises their hands. And so it's like, okay, you know, when I started, I was thinking about workways, but workways are, you know, you got to think of a web of things. They could be corporate structure, they could be your team habits, they can be regulatory structures outside of the team, they could be, you know, different policies and procedures. And the reason I decided to focus on team habits versus workways is team habits is something, team habits are something that we can all participate in. In fact, we do all participate in. We can't all change our org structure, right? We can't all change the regulatory structures outside of our team and organization, but we all participate in team habits. They're malleable. And in your team, and by team, I mean something very specific here. I mean the 4 to 8 people that you spend 80% of your work time with, not your org or not your department, just those 4 to 8 souls that you have a lot of rapport with. And Pam, when I started, I realized very quickly that Team Habits, this book was actually about power. And I was like, oof, I don't know that I want to write a book on power, right? Because that inevitably takes the book a certain way and frames the conversation. But I realized throughout the writing of the book is like, you know, there are 3 dimensions of power at work. And we only really talk about 2, right? So there's personal power. That's my power too. That's what I can do with my own capabilities, with my own expertise, and so on. So that's personal power. And then there's institutional power. And this is power over, right? This is my power over other people or other people's power over me. Most discussions of work center on those 2 dimensions. But there's a really important dimension that we just overlook, and that's interpersonal power. That's power with. And with those 4 to 8 people, there's a lot that we can do together that we don't have to go from a power over sort of paradigm, and we don't have to go to a personal power paradigm. So Pam, we've collaborated together. There are things we can do together that neither one of us can do by ourselves.
Yes.
And the way we do it doesn't invoke like Pam has power over Charlie or Charlie has power over Pam. That's not it. We have partnership. And really what I want from Team Habits is for people to pay more attention to this interpersonal power and lean into it. And when we think of all of the different things that happen, so I see some executive coaches on here. You know, as executive coaches, you're forever dealing with triangles, right? You're dealing with your client and, you know, two of their direct reports are fighting about something, and then the boss gets involved. It's like, why do we even have that? When we lean into interpersonal power, most of what we tell people to do is like, go talk to your coworker, because it's Pam, it's Chris, it's Nikki. These are people, you know, your kids carpool together. Like, you hang out on the weekends. Why do we make it weird when we have something at work that we need to talk about, right? So I want us to really, really reclaim those relationships. I personally think that at work, we don't need more people not giving a fuck. Sorry. We don't need more people not giving a fork, right? We don't need more people checking out. We don't need more people going the stoic route. We need more people leaning into these rich interpersonal relationships and actually giving a damn. And when we give a damn about each other and take that relationship seriously, we can do mighty things, right? And that's really what Team Habits is really has people think about it. It's like, if your meetings don't work for your team of 4 to 8 people, fix them together. It's Pam, it's Nikki, it's Angela. Like, we can come together and do that. We don't need someone else.
Yeah. And let's normalize talking about power, because power is the thread that's going to be intersectional, that's going to be talking about so many different dynamics within the workplace. And so thank you for doing that in your thought leadership. You know that it's part of the approach. The way I define thought leadership is just your specific approach to solving the core problem or challenge that your clients have. And by including something, it's the broken printer in the room when we think about it from the individual power perspective, where it is not safe to talk about those dimensions. And we think about the way that plays out, especially within our entrepreneurial world, where we have all kinds of distributed teams, folks that might work with folks at different locations around the world, when we think about compensation, pay equity, there are so many different dimensions that come into the way in which we understand and work with each other. So I love making that really deliberate. Admission too, I'm having my broken printer, oh no moment. When I did my last team retreat, we organized part of our priorities for the quarter around the question, what bothers you the most? That came from my friend Greg Hartle. I know you look at this as well, Charlie. And what rose to the top was actually not completing our like Notion portal, the place where we have all our project management, because it's one of those cases, if anybody's ever used that, Asana, Notion, that if everything is not completely tied together, then it's just annoying for everybody involved. And I had this realization in this very moment that like, oh my gosh, I think the deadline is passed by 2 days by which I was supposed to complete my portion of it. So real talk in front of everybody, when you think about it often, of what are the things that can build trust. First of all, I'm going to send a message to my team right away after this saying, I realize I'm a couple days behind, I'm on it, so they know I haven't forgotten. But also where you start to see where trust gets eroded, where you're not only mentioning what it is that's going on, but you are holding true to your word. So I'm curious what is the way that you see habits come in? When I think about habits, which I love, like in my approach to tiny marketing actions, what are specific kinds of habits that might be strengthening the strategic work that you're doing around workways or any kind of broken spots in workways?
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned trust, because trust is one of those words that actually has multiple sort of aspects to it. And it's got this moral nature that can make it very hard to discuss at work, right? So it's like the lying, cheating, stealing, that sort of things. We use that when we say trust. But usually at work, what we're talking about is the more neutral, can I count on you sort of version of that. So I say that because as teammates, when you're having conversations around trust, it's always useful to recontextualize what you're actually talking about. It's like, I'm not talking about your character. I'm not talking about you being a liar or a thief or anything like that. I'm just talking about how we count on each other and how we can trust each other's word when we say we're going to do a thing, right? And so that's one of those important habits to really go into, like when you're having this conversation, is like, when I say trust, this is what we mean. And you have to do that almost every time, right? Because of just the nature of that word. And so I'm trying to think of some specific ways to get into the question that you asked there. When it comes to more of thinking about the strategic work, and some of you all have heard me talk about this, right? I think one thing as a team habit that you can do is talk about the strategic, urgent, and recurring logjam that happens with so many teams. And by that, I mean, there's 3 types of sort of activities that happen in most teams. There's the strategic work that you need to do. There's the urgent work that pops up, and there's a recurring work. And most of the time, depending upon the teams, right, most of the time, the strategic work is actually what falls behind, right? Because we can't talk about the fact that most of our work days are filled up with 50 to 65% of just recurring stuff, right? So you add the recurring stuff on top of that, and then you add the urgent stuff that eats up another, 15 to 20%. There's just not enough room for strategic work, right? And so what you can do as teams is actually start talking about that mix and matrix and really get clear about, okay, when we sit down and we make a strategic plan, let's get real about actually how much capacity we have to devote towards strategic projects. And if it's none, get real about that. That's okay, right? It's when you pretend that you have capacity that you don't, that you end up in the position where you're talking about, Pam, where it's like, oh crap, we said we were going to do things, we're not going to do them, and now trust has been eroded. Because really what happens is either, at the meeting itself, you weren't talking about the real constraints that your team has, or you unintentionally decided something else has a higher priority than that thing that you said that the team said was a high priority for them. So strategic, urgent, recurring logjam is definitely something to talk about. I think really you'll love this, Pam, because you know me and focus blocks, right? Actually,
I was about to say that. See,
yeah.
We are so in sync. Yes, no shock.
Actually using the concept of focus blocks, which are from start finishing, but these are 90 to 120 minute blocks of time, and really doing an audit of your team's focus blocks to determine how many they actually have, and using that as a baseline to determine how many projects that they can do. Because if it turns out that they get 0 focus blocks, there's not going to be any strategic work that happens. Sorry about it. Right. And that creates a great intervention for the team to talk about why there's no space. Is it just that you have an accumulation of all these broken printers and systems that don't work, that you just spend most of your days running around trying to figure out whether this is the right Notion page, or that's the right Notion page, or this version of the Notion page, and by the time you do that, you're worn out and you haven't gotten anything done?
Yeah.
Is it that you're not, automating to the ways that you can? Or is it just that your team is not talking really about the expectations and obligations that it set out for, and you need to have that conversation? And again, I have to say this over and over again. This is your team of 4 to 8 people that you have a interpersonal relationship with, that you can have that conversation with without it being a whole thing, right? You don't need a mediator. You can just get real about some of these conversations together. And if we assume that most people are doing the best they can, and most people are already at capacity, and most people want to be good teammates, I think it opens up a lot of room for us to have these conversations that remove the conflict and tension. And it's just about how we're going to make it through together.
It's really true. And I was momentarily distracted because I'm doing a team facilitation here in a couple of months. And I was like, oh, Charlie has new frameworks, so I can use some of them for attribution. So I can't wait for your certification licensing tools coming out. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Everybody make Charlie do that, because he creates the greatest frameworks. I know. And it was, I think it is Mohammed who was saying, like, you need to have a perfect strategic plan. Like, we all agree, I think we can all agree it's great to have a thorough strategic plan. Where Charlie and I have seen things fall down time again is with the perfect plan. If you are not addressing work ways and team habits, nothing gets done. It becomes something that is just a really exciting thing on, a piece of paper. So I totally agree. We want to do our strategic work really exceptionally. And in implementation, this is the area I think where it can fall down. So I know Angela's doing the great work of reminding me. I'm doing an all-day intensive here today, which is why I can't stay the whole hour. But I do want to say before I go, actually, I want to ask you, Charlie, in front of all of these assembled witnesses, where we can really sit back and hear, what is the vision that you have for team habits? What do you want to happen with this book in your wildest dreams?
Ultimately, team habits is about making work for everyone. We know that work cultures don't work for a lot of us, and it doesn't seem like we have ways to fix and engage that. But in my wildest dreams, we stop checking out and letting other folks script how we show up for and with each other. And we realize that, life is short. And with these 4 to 8 souls that we spend most of our time with, if we make our work better, we make our lives better. And that's, at the end of the day, what Team Habits is about, right? It's about making our work life better, but it's really, if we make our work life better, we make our life better. I would love for this to become a worldwide bestseller.
Yes.
It's got we've already got 7 foreign licenses or foreign acquisition rights for it, so it's already picking up steam on that front.
Yes.
And so I really want it to be one of those things where, when there's an idea or when there's a plan, or when you come from that strategic planning session, one of the first things that people start thinking is like, how do we need to adjust our team habits to make that happen? And if we do that, if we keep the focus on our team habits and our work ways, we get to have these rich relationships with each other, because we're not picking at each other and we're not feeling like we're working with idiots and so on and so forth. We really get to be with each other and do work that matters. and work that we can be proud of.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And know for you, the heart is always in the impact of the work. And I'll tell you, as a long time person who loves you and loves your work, I am excited to share with exuberant joy your work, because it's really important. You, to me, are an architect of liberatory change. Your voice matters, your lived experience matters, your perspective matters for you to be on bookshelves. And I am so glad that I got to celebrate this with you today and with everybody here in Witness. I love you so much. And I'm super proud of you in hopefully a non-patronizing way, but in a way because I've seen the journey for a long time. And I'm just excited that you did this, and I'm excited for the transformation that will come from it.
Thanks so much. And thanks for joining us today. I'm going to be your little brother and nudge you off quickly because I know you have really great work to do.
Do I have to go? Do I have to go? Okay.
You have to go, sis. All right.
All right. Well, I love you. Goodbye,
Thanks
everybody.
so much.
Have a great rest of your time. Okay.
So much, Pam. Oh, okay. After she kind of brought a little bit of a tear to my eye there. That's, wow, talk about some joy and fun getting to do this kind of work with your, your work big sister. So I love Pam. Anyway, I'm so glad that you and Pam got to have that conversation. We're going to move over into Q&A now. So we've still got some time here together, and we would love to open it up for those of you who might have some questions or curiosities about team habits, about using team habits. What's coming up for you. Feel free to, you can just kind of wave at me, or you can raise your hand, or you can drop it over here in the chat. Whatever works for you. All right, Casey, let's do this.
What's up, Charlie? I hope you're feeling better.
I'm working on it.
Yeah, I just received the book last week. I can't wait to dig into it. And I said in the chat, one of the companies I coach in New York City, a rapid growth company, really needs this. They need to prioritize this to the top of their reading list. So I'm so excited about the timing of that, and want to do anything I can to help the cause, because people need this. Something I hadn't had a chance to read it yet, but something you touched on today that really stuck with me are those different power dynamics that people kind of forfeit the intrapersonal one. They avoid that one, it seems like, at all costs. I guess one of the question is, what do you think we get out of avoiding that intrapersonal one? Because I feel like that's such a huge opportunity for us at work. And literally, if you think about it, it's why we're hired, is to work with people to create big things. So what do you think we get out of that? And why is that kind of like the big obstacle for teams?
Well, so when I first started writing Team Habits, I walked down the bookshelf, I went to a bookstore, and I was walking down the personal relationship aisle, and I looked at all the questions that were being asked there, like, are they the one? And how do we have more positive experiences together? And what's our future together? And things like that. And then I walked down the business aisle and realized they're the same questions, actually, just in a different context, right? Is this company the one? How do we have more positive experiences together? How do we get more of the right things done together? So I'm like, that's fascinating. And so the reason I think we check out on our interpersonal relationships at work is the same reason we check out on them at home, right? Because it's hard, right? It's sometimes hard to actually posit that your needs, wants, and preferences matter. And it's actually hard to potentially face rejection from other people, right? If you have an idea about something, they don't like it, that can be potentially hard. And so I think by checking out of our interpersonal relationships, it gives us that sort of easy button to not engage with work, because it's like living life, full throttle can be hard, right? Because you can't just accept that something is a certain way without actually engaging with it. And I know that sounds very coachy, but I'm talking to a coach, right? The thing about paradigms is, when you choose a paradigm, you reinforce a paradigm. When you choose a paradigm, you reinforce that paradigm. So when you choose the paradigm of institutional power, that the broken printer's over there in the corner, and it's not your job, it's the boss's job to fix that, you have reinforced that paradigm of institutional power. But the thing about it is, Casey, as an executive coach, most leaders don't want to use their institutional power. Like, that's the last thing you want to do, is to tell someone to do something just because you got status and authority to do so. That's not what we want to do. That's not what they want to do. But when you continually choose the dimension of interpersonal power or institutional power, you actually make leaders do the very thing they don't want to do. Right. And so I think what we're going to have to get better about is, radical candor with each other, and really just understanding that in those teams, and again, I have to say this over and over again, 4 to 8 people that you spend a lot of time with, you can have a lot of fun conversations about positive change that doesn't have to be hard, right? And with that group of people, I talk about this in the belonging chapter. If you've ever worked in food service, or if you've been on a sports team, or you've been in the military, or you've been anything where you're like close proximity with people, you bump into them all the time, right? You step on toes, you elbow a buddy, right? These things just sort of happen as the course of things. And it's never really personal unless it is personal, but that's a whole different thing. Most of the time it's just like, sorry, bro, I stepped on your toe. Or, I accidentally put this plate, where you were trying to work. It's all good. I call these bumps. We bump into each other all the time. I think when we recognize this interpersonal dimension and we can talk about these bumps, we can say, hey man, you stepped on my toe. It's not personal. It's not like, why did you step on my toe? It's not all this type of things. It's like, hey, we keep stepping on each other's toes here. How can we stop that? Because neither one of us like it. You don't like stepping on my toe, and I don't like my toe being stepped on. What are we going to do about it together? It deburrs so much of that conflict, so much of that tension, and just lets us have those conversations. So I don't know if I've 100% answered your question on this one, Casey, but
oh, you did. I mean, it's something I've definitely felt, but it's just cool to hear you articulate it that way. I just, again, think it's so important. And, when you talk about institutional power, I think about like all this language that's thrown around toxic work cultures. Like, they're unacceptable. Nobody wants one, but who's willing to take the responsibility to help improve it? Are we deferring all that power to the powers that be to do it? Because they probably won't, But,
they can't. They fundamentally can't. That's what. So I'm always going to be an advocate for the people with the least power in an organization. So I'm going to start there. But I think when people think of CEOs and people on boards, they think of them as having more power than they actually do, right? They are compromised individuals just like you are. They're stuck between different priorities, between different things, just like that. And, what we've learned from lean methodology is that the people closest to the work and people closest to the problem are actually the best suited at solving it, right? And so, I understand part of the reason this book came up is because, on the one hand, I would talk to senior leaders and they would say, we want our people to have more autonomy. We want them to make more decisions, and we want them to do more of their best work. So cool. And then we talk to managers and we talk to individual contributors, and they'd say, we want more autonomy. We want to be able to make more decisions, and we want to do better work. I'm like, okay, well, you both want the same thing. What's happening here? Right. A lot of it is work ways and team habits that are getting in the way of that. So that's, the beauty of team habits, Casey, is that this doesn't have to scale, right? You don't have to have a one size fits all way of your team coming together that goes across the entire organization. You can't, and it won't work, right? And that's the beauty of it, because it gets us out of this idea of like, can we just get the higher ups to approve that we don't have to have, meetings a certain way? Like, why, so many leaders, I say this as an executive coach, they come to me and they're like, Charlie, they keep coming to me with all of these questions that they can figure out themselves. Like, why are they asking me what their meeting cadence should be? I don't know, right? I'm not in the work. What is that about, right? And so I think the opportunity that we have here is we can say, look, we 4 to 8 people are unique souls, and the way this team works now is very unique to us. What works for us and what doesn't? Let's keep the best of what works for us, and let's come together and fix in the habit level the things that don't. And let's just take a quarter to make our meetings better. And if we're done with at the end of quarter, we feel good about our meetings, then we move on to the next thing. But if it takes us 2 years to actually make meetings work, that's fine, because we're going to be having meetings anyway, right? Let's just make them better every time. And fundamentally, like the work that we do in personal relationships, any work that you do to make your team work better and you really go into those personal relationships will not be in vain. Like the particular projects you do might not work, but showing that you care, showing that you're really there to get each other's back and to really cover down on work, that will always pay out when it comes to belonging, rapport, and morale. So you can't go wrong by focusing on this stuff, but you can go wrong by not caring about it.
Spike the mic. Thank you. That was awesome. So many notes.
Thank you so much for that great question, Casey. Does anyone else have a question? Would love to answer a few more if we can. Feel free to drop it over here in the chat, which I'm going to try to take a look at. Oh, yeah. Patricia, do you want to come on and ask your question, or would you like me to ask it for you?
Hi, sure.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not quite video ready yet today.
Oh, good. We're just happy you're here.
Fabulous. Glad to be here. Charlie, one of the things I'm curious about, I obviously I've followed your work for a while, and I know that this book has a really high degree of emphasis on the importance of human interactions, which is something I very much support, advocate, and believe in. And at the same time, I'm also really in touch with the conversation around AI right now and the pace in the workplace of experimentation and integration that's taking place. And so I'm curious where you anticipate that we might see the most effective integrations between human interactions and AI when it comes to teams.
Yeah, I think the opportunity that AI presents us is that we're going to have to learn to be better humans. Because a lot of the rote work and a lot of the lower level work, AI is going to eat up very, very quickly. And so a few things, I'm not quite answering the question yet, Patricia, but one thing that we should anticipate is teams are going to get smaller. It's an inevitability that teams are going to get smaller. And so I think what that's going to change is we're going to see a shift more to, if you think of Bloom's taxonomy and you think of the top 3 levels of evaluation, analysis, and creation, we're going to see more tasks that go to humans that are in that evaluation, analysis, and creation, because that's not what AI can do very well, right? And so I think that's where that's going to go. And I don't know, to be honest, to what degree AI is going to support the interpersonal relationships to the degree. I think it's going to make us less annoyed about some of the rote work that AI will be able to do for us. But at the team level, I'm not sure about the rest. And I wish I had a better answer to that, Patricia. But nuance, context, deep pattern recognition is the thing that AI is not good at yet. And that's what it's going to take for it to really improve those personal relationships at the team level.
Fabulous. Thank you. Yeah, I don't think anybody knows the answers yet. I think we're all kind of experimenting and learning. I love what you just said at the beginning, though, which is that we're all going to have to learn to be better humans, because I think that is going to be a really important component. Thank you.
Thanks, Patricia.
Thanks, Patricia. So Charlie, Noah asked if you have any coaching suggestions on, or actually, Noah, do you want to come on here and ask this, or would you like me to ask for you? If I don't hear from you, I'll just ask. Okay.
Yeah, I can take it offline.
Oh, okay.
I don't need to Go ahead.
No, if you want to ask your question, we'd love to hear from you.
Go ahead, Lee.
Oh, okay. All right, got it. So Noah asks if you have any suggestions on how to constructively nudge a colleague more toward communicating with way less detail. Summarize, please, versus the current state of using way too much extraneous detail and repetition without offending them.
So one is to sort of lead by example on this one, Noah. And so TLDRs and bottom lines up front can go a long way, make that as a part of your practice. And then the second would be sort of the nudge that like, hey, you know, we're reading on phones and tablets and we're reading really quickly. And sometimes it's hard to keep up with all the details. Is there any way that you can provide a summary, you know, at the top of it so that we know what it is that really gets that and sort of work with them on that point? I think anytime I've had to coach someone through that scenario, what they find is that them providing the summary actually helps them understand what they're trying to say better. And so it's not just for you, it's not just for the rest of the team, no, it's actually for that person, is to sort of get better at articulating that. So one, lead by example. Two, see if that's something that they're up for trying and go from there. That's most of what I got for you there, Noah.
Thank you. Thanks for the question, Noah. And apologies, I didn't understand you were asking me to do it. So I'm glad that we could get to it though. Corey, would you like to ask your question about creative teams?
Yeah, Charlie, I know you know what I'm talking about here. It's really creative teams, especially talking about like musicians, filmmakers, artists, that kind of stuff. The teams are usually short-lived. They don't work for the same company, and you know, they're project oriented, right? So I'd love to hear how teams of creatives can think about using some of the ideas in team habits, because some of the challenges that I see with creative teams is they're often like very pressure filled, and there's a lot of like anger and frustration and urgency around creative projects. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on how those kind of teams can bring some of this in.
Yeah, so a lot of these creative teams are like perennially ad hoc teams, right? They sort of show up and do their thing and then they run from there. So it's a great context for this. So first thing to say, all 8 categories of team habits still apply to ad hoc teams, right? So that's thing one. What's difficult is typically in these types of creative teams, there's not a designated leader. And so no one gets to set the default, right? And so what I would say on that one is, if you are part of these teams, learn to at least suggest different ways of doing things. And I've done this, Corey, I think you've seen you do this before. It's like, hey, we're doing this thing. There are a lot of different ways we can do this. How about we try to get this set up in Notion and I'll get that set up for you? Or how about we try to get it set up and I'll take on the work myself to do it this way, so that we're not running around like between text and Discord and email and all the 82 different ways that different people want to do. And so someone typically has to sort of, I don't want to say take the lead, but own that sort of process side of things and just sort of go from that point. Now, part of what, especially for creative teams, especially if they're novice creatives, there's this sort of push against structure, like imposing structure makes people less creative and you have to deal with some of that. Like, why do we have to like have a plan for this? Why can't we just sort of shoot from the hip? Because that's where creativity comes in. Like, so there might be some education about that piece, right? That's actually not true. But I would just say that like, in those scenarios, I would start with 2 or 3 things. One, what's our cadence of conversation that we need to have to keep this project going? 2, is there a central place where we're going to keep stuff? 3, how do we make decisions about things if we disagree? I think if you start with those 3 basic sort of questions you can get a long way to working out that, because those 3 questions will actually make you start thinking about the other ones, right? I'm like, oh, we actually do need to have a check-in every other week about this project. Otherwise, it's just not going to go. Or, oh, who actually is the person, I'll speak from the music side, who actually is the final person that gets to decide the song is done, right? A lot of that can happen because it's not clear who says we're done, we're moving on to the next one, versus 8 different people thinking that the song is going to go different ways. So that's where I would focus at. 1, all of the categories still apply. 2, those 3 questions will help you sort of get going. And 3, someone needs to be the coordinator. And I would encourage it to be like, why not you? Because if you're the coordinator, you get to pick the default. If you don't step up, you get somebody else's craziness. So you've got a vested interest in picking a system that works for you. Does that help, Corey?
It does, yeah. Thank you.
Cool.
Thanks for the question, Corey. Nikki, oh my gosh, you asked the question. I was like, oh yes, because what team is not already at capacity and still wants to do more? Would you like to ask your question?
Well, yeah, Charlie, what you said earlier about assume everyone wants to do their best, assume everyone is at capacity, and assume everyone wants to be a great team member. I was like, gosh, that's so true, and talk about building trust in teams, right? But then I fixated on that second one, and I was like, we're all at capacity, so how the heck do we do more? And then I realized that maybe a smarter question to ask would be, how do we do less? Because I have a feeling you might have some thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's actually the way to go. So the 5 projects rule makes an appearance in Team Habits as well, right? So Nikki, you might be familiar with talking about that, but like there's a certain amount of load that a team can have, right? And you can't just keep piling on and piling on and piling on. And so it really becomes, if you want to take on a new thing, well, did you finish something that you were currently doing? Or are you dropping something that you're currently doing? Because you can't put 14 units of stuff in a 10-unit bag. It doesn't work, right? And so I think what this allows us to do when we switch it to talking about team habits and workways and how we're working together, we might be able to get out of the idea that just efforting more is inherently valuable. Because it turns out efforting more is not inherently valuable, right? What are the projects? What are the activities that are actually moving things forward? And how do you focus on just those and get rid of the BS and everything around that, right? Teams, I have a post on this, I think Megan will put it in, but teams have a tendency to get project locked, right? So you commit to a project and then you're going to see that project through no matter what. And that is one of the most crippling thing about teams, where when you really need to be goal focused, goal locked, but project flexible, right? So if you're trying to go towards a certain goal and you're trying this project and it's actually not getting you there, the answer is not work harder on the project. It's actually find another project that gets you there better, faster, smarter, right? And so when we start thinking about it in terms of that way, you can start thinking about it in the sense of like which projects or areas of work are not actually adding any real value to it. It's the Pareto principle. And how do we as a team consciously decide to stop doing them? Because that's the thing when it comes to collaborative work. I can't really just, like, let's say we're on a team and we committed to doing a project. I can't just bail on the project just all by myself. Like, you're part of this too. So if you're part of it and I'm part of it and we're both committed to doing it, then we don't have a real way of getting out of it unless we say, you know what? I don't think this one actually is the one that we're doing. Like, what if we just didn't? Or what if we chose to do something different? Or what if we chose to do this a different way? So a few things to take away. One is, before you add a new project, you got to think, did you finish something? Or did you drop something? Because if you're already at capacity, where's this new project going to go? 2, stay goal focused, but project flexible. And so if the projects really aren't moving you there, or there's some that are moving there better or creating better results, focus more on those and not the span of things. And three, bake in the reality that things take longer than you think as an individual and as a team. And so if your team thinks on first blush that they can get it done in a week, it's probably going to be 2 weeks. How do you factor that in, and how do you get real about that? That's
So
what I got
good.
for you.
Thank you, Charlie. I love that so much. I especially love that the goal can stay the same, but the project can change. That's yeah, great advice as always. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nikki.
That's such a great question. Maria, would you like to ask your question, or would you like me to ask it for you? What are you most comfortable with? Such a good question. Just a moment. So I'll go ahead and ask the question, but if you want to come on, Maria, please do. So Charlie, Maria asked, do you have any advice for someone moving from individual contributor role to manager team leader? Love that.
I've been thinking about this one for about 4 weeks. I had someone else ask me that too. The chief difference between an individual contributor and a manager is that a manager gets things done through people. What so many people making this transition struggle with is they hang on to the individual contributor doer mindset, and lose track of the fact that their job is now coordinating between multiple people. And so one of the first things to really get used to is the fact that for any goal, any bit of work that needs to get done, by default, you're probably not the first person to do it. Mainly your job is who does this, or who else does this, and what support do they need. Two, I guess the easiest way to say this is your job shifts from being the person who knows the answers or who works towards getting the answers to the person who helps other people find the answers they need to get their work done. Too many individual contributors take on the subject matter expertise sort of role and move that into being a manager, and they're the one that like answers all the questions and knows all the things. And that's a way of unintentionally disempowering your team. So be careful as you're working with your teammates that you don't become what Michael Bungay-Stanier calls the advice monster, or the queen of all answers, to use Jenny Blake's way of saying the same thing. Instead, start thinking about how you can help people come up with the solutions, answers, and questions that they need to get, and working through how they can do that without you around too. Those would be 2 first steps that I would say on that one. But clearly I need to write more about that, because I was reading through, there's a book called, I think, The First Time Manager. I'm looking at it over here. And I was reading through what they were talking about. It's like they didn't cover the hardest part about the switch from individual contributor to manager, which again is that shift from I use my hands to get things done to I work with other people to get things done, or I coordinate other people to get things done. And that mindset shift takes a while to get through. So Maria, I hope that's helpful. That's just a starting place to go from there. But when in doubt, sit on your hands and keep the work in your individual contributors or subject matter expertise hands and not your own.
Thank you, Maria. Okay, we still have a few questions going, and so I want to acknowledge that we're kind of, at what would be an hour, but we also started a little late. So we still do have a few questions, and I would love, Charlie, how's your COVID energy? Do you
I
have
probably have another couple of questions in me today.
Okay. Okay. Jeremy, do you want to go ahead and ask?
Thanks, Casey.
Yeah, congratulations, Charlie, on the book launch. So I'm going to be sending copies of this book to organizations that we work with. And one of, I guess, my interpretations of Team Habits is that a lot of it is about giving up traditional power to your team. And the organizations that we work are currently struggling with very old school patriarchal leadership, power all at the top. So when they get this book, my plan is to write something to put into the front. Is there anything that you would want to say to somebody who's going to read this book and go, well, but then what if my team says one of the habits is something I don't like and I don't want to do it? And how can you talk with them about giving up some of that power?
Yeah, Jeremy, that's part of the reason why I didn't tackle the power question head on in the book, right? So what I would say is at the end of the day, it's about creating specific types of results within teams and different types of outcomes. And at a broad level, the outcomes that we want in our organizations are obviously great performance, but we also want belonging and engagement. Partially what they're dealing with is that the more they hold on to power, the more they do all the things that, you know, like, what if they don't like them? What if it's not my way? The more that they're going to continue in the pattern of low retention, burnout, overwhelmed, and disengagement that they currently have. So if they really want to make an enduring organization, where people want to work there, where people feel some sense of agency and control, where it feels like the work is actually in alignment with the values of the organization, which I happen to know what organizations you're talking about, they're going to have to let the teams sort how they need to run to make the goal, to make the work happen.
Thank you.
Does that help?
Yeah. I needed something brief, so that was good.
Sometimes I'll land brevity, sometimes I don't. Thanks, Jeremy.
Jeremy. All right. I think we got to all the questions that we had. I hope I'm not missing anyone. If I am, just give me a little wave. But it's been such a pleasure, and we really, really appreciate all of you being here with us today to help celebrate the launch of Team Habits today. It has certainly been a labor of love, and I think Charlie would probably be also the first to tell you that while this is certainly his book, and his name is on it, that it doesn't happen in a vacuum, and it's with teams. Big love and shout out to our team PF, our Productive Flourishing team, but also the Hachette Go team, our clients, colleagues, early readers, advanced readers for the books. I mean, just so many people have been integral in making this happen. So Charlie, would you like to say a little something before we head out?
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's really about those 4 to 8 people that you work with day in, day out. And I really want you to lean into those relationships and just, it's kind of like I said on Substack a couple of weeks ago, be the teammate you want your teammates to be. And if we, for lack of better words, take the reins of these relationships, work better together, and try to make work better, then our lives will be better. And I just want to remind you, you're going to show up to work one way or the other. So why not make it better? You're already there. So thanks so much, everyone, for joining me today. I saw, I clicked over to see some names, family members. Thank you for showing up. Other folks that are new to us, and I really appreciate everyone for your support. And let's get out there and do this, y'all.
Thank you all so much. Congratulations to the two of you who won the books, and thank you for being here. Thank you to all of you for taking the time. For those of you with the great questions, big shout out to Pam again for being here with us today. And Charlie, big congratulations to you. I know you need to go rest now and really recover. But we would greatly appreciate it if you'd be up for sharing about team habits today. I dropped a link over there just a moment ago to a post that Charlie put up on LinkedIn. If you'd feel called to share it, that would be amazing. And I also dropped my email address over here. So if any of you have any questions or want to know anything more about team habits, feel free to email me anytime. So thank you all so much for being here. I'm really glad that we got to start the launch day with all of you. Take care.